Okay, so this is in every way a bit of a new venture for me because we're going to be dealing with pieces of excuse me, text block that we're now going to reassemble, and so it's going to need some new methods. And one thing, this is going to be, there's going to be a lot of in terms of, reattaching pages, resewing, gatherings of leaves and so on. But in order to keep a really good control of everything, we're going to need a workbench where ultimately we're going to be able to basically assemble the text block back into a cohesive whole and then get it ready for binding with some covers. So in order to make that workbench, what I've got here is, this is just a piece of very light balsa wood. It was, my son used it in a taekwondo class many years ago. And so what I'm going to be doing is using this with some placeholders for what will eventually become the raised bands. So if we look very closely here, there are basically, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places where there have been raised bands in the past, and frankly, I want to replicate that again. I don't want to sort of be sewing these pages in a way that's materially different to how they were originally sewn. So what I'm going to do is plan for how this text block would be reassembled. So I'm going to mark on this board the places that align with where the raised bands would have been. So I'm going to just make a mark here, 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 and here. And what my plan is to have a piece of wire, metal, coming up out of a hole situated here. And what we'll be able to do is to actually sew around that, and eventually that'll end up as a thread that we can use to assemble. Now we've got these holes, I'm actually going to make 2 more holes behind each. These don't need to be immensely precise, these back rows, because what's going to happen is the wire's going to go through here, underneath, up through here, down through here. I just want the wire to basically stay in place so it's not sort of moving around. So that's what those will be there for. So I'm going to take this away and drill them, and then we'll thread them with some wire, and then hopefully we'll have the beginnings of a workbench. Okay, so I freely confess this looks like some kind of grade school electronics circuitry project that's gone horribly wrong. Let's talk through what we've done here. So we drilled the holes, and then what I did was I took 6 paper clips that have been clad in a plastic, as you can see, and unwound them, and then basically pulled them through the holes to create these vertical things here. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that what I've also done is I've nipped off the plastic from the top, I don't know, ½ inch or so. So what we end up with is a set of sort of vertical spikes that correspond, if we go back to this example here, correspond with where the raised bands used to be, and again will be, for the book. So what that does is it gives us a working place where we can do our sewing, and as we sew, we have something that we can actually tie the thread around. So if you think about it, this is the whole book here. Those are our title pages just in there. So what we're going to be doing is actually working from the back of the book forward as we actually perform the reassembly of the text block. So we're now in a position to really start work. So probably worth just explaining what this is about and why I've removed this little bit of plastic here. So the intent is that I'm going to attach a piece of string at the top of each of these spikes. And the reason I remove the plastic here is, if you think about it, the thread's going to be quite, the thread from the text block is going to be quite tightly wound against this plastic. So I don't want to be in a situation where I'm actually pulling the text block up over something that's actually thicker in girth than this plastic is. So by removing this plastic at the top, I've made the diameter slightly thinner, which means what I can do is use a little bit of tape later in the process to actually wrap around this bit of bare metal, a bit of the string, and so I'm able to pull the work product up onto the string. So eventually we'll end up with the text block actually sitting on 6 pieces of string like this, that will then be something that we can use to attach the boards and perform the wider restoration as I've shown in other videos. So that's the rationale for these bare sections here. So really we're in a position to start to sort of look at the text block and understand how it was initially bound, and also, frankly, take it apart, because there's really nothing that's salvageable here in terms of the way it's had here together today. So you'll see I've got a variety of items we're going to be using. I want to keep a very close control of all of the pages, and in particular, obviously, the first few pages are critically important with the signature. So it's going to be important that we don't lose or damage anything as we work. So I've got a whole series of freezer bags here, and I'm going to be assigning each freezer bag to each gathering. So in other words, this for example will have its own freezer bag, and we're going to sort of number them carefully so we always have control of everything. We have some needles, thimbles. These are sort of naturally coloured threads. I've got a couple of different colours. The threads are thin, that's deliberate. The other thing I'm conscious about is, as we work on this text block, there are going to be various times when we actually need to add some paper reinforcements here and there, because the pages themselves have really degraded and become badly unattached. This would be a good example. That's going to add thickness, and I don't want that plus the thickness of the thread to create a situation where we've created a book that's an aggregate a 1/4 inch thinner at the back than it is at the foredge. So I want to be trying to use thin paper, thin thread, and so for that reason I've got this thin sort of naturally coloured thread. So we're going to be using that. So the first step is going to be to really get into the text block and understand how it was sewn, if that's something we want to replicate, and also just experiment a little bit. We'll get some sheets of paper. We'll try and actually create a single threaded gathering like this. And if we can do that with some spare pieces of paper, then we know that we'll be able to proceed with confidence to actually reassemble this text block. So there we go.